Hello, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and affectionately known by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series: Recover Ed, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcast aims to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We are glad you're here, and thank you for listening.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Oh, we have Sabrina on for the first time. How exciting. Hi, Sabrina. So what this is for the new ladies on the call is each week we do 1 or 2 workshops. One of the workshops that we do is called Interview with the Drunk. And if you're in your first week, then it's required that you attend. But after the first week, it's not required that you attend. So what we do is we have a guest on. And this just gives us, and Marlena has done this before, so welcome, Marlena. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm really excited for the new girls to get the chance to hear you and all of the things. So for the new ladies, we have Sabrina and Lauren who are in their first week. Everybody else who is here on their free will. They choose to be here. For the newbies who have not done this before, we just open it up, and whatever questions you have, you can ask. So this gives you the opportunity to have more of an intimate, God-guided conversation and ask things that you don't really get to ask in a typical meeting. I will, start off by welcoming Marlena. Like I said, she's done this before, and I'm very grateful to have you back. And so would you mind just introducing yourself and giving a little background to qualify you as an alcoholic and what brought you to AA this time?
Sure. So thank you for asking me back. I loved doing this last time. My name's Marlena, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober since April 7th of 2010. I qualify myself. Pretty typical. Never felt comfortable in my own skin. Always felt like something was missing, and I didn't know what that was until I took my first drink. And that sense of ease and comfort that they talk about in the book was just there at once, and that was it. And from then until the time that I was actually able to get sober, I was in love with alcohol. It was everything. I really never had any control over the amount that I drank. I also rarely tried to control it. I just decided that, it just felt so good that what was the point? I was very delusional in thinking that, when I finally decided that I would want to quit, I could just put it down. So there were years of drinking, years of stints in rehab, in and out of the program. I will say that I started going to rehab in 2003 and I got sober in 2010. And in those 7 years, I had never actually read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous until 2010. So, I just didn't have any real recovery. I didn't have any real solution. But I remember sitting in treatment for the last time in 2010, and I had left treatment and I got drunk and I woke up in the hospital. And for the first time that I could really remember, I knew that if I left the hospital, I would drink again. But I knew that I also didn't want to stay in that hospital bed because I was miserable. I just wanted to peel my skin off. And so the idea of not having alcohol was horrendous. And the idea of leaving again and doing it all over was horrendous too. And that was really the first time that I knew in my heart that I didn't have a choice. And so thankfully I was able to go back to treatment and actually work the steps and have a real spiritual experience. And I've been sober since then.
Thank you. Anybody have a question? Okay. Well, then I have a question. You said you were not sober, in and out for 7 years, but never had read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. What made you change your mind that the last time, and what were you doing in the 7 years? Just coming to meetings and that was it?
Well, I wasn't sober in those 7 years, so I would go to treatment. I would get the family off my back. I would get back some of the things that I had lost, and then I would leave. And I would go to meetings, and I would work the steps, but I never read the book. My sponsor would be like, "Okay, go write down your resentments and do this and that." I'd be like, "Oh, okay." Like it never really even occurred to me that I was missing something. But I would always end up drinking again, always. And so in those 7 years, it was just kind of that same cycle. There would be periods where like years would go by with no attempt at sobriety. I was just kind of this like step one martyr. I was like, oh, well, if I'm powerless and then like I can't help it and you guys should just feel sorry for me. And I made no effort to change whatsoever. And so when I did finally end up in treatment, or rather in the hospital after treatment the last time, I knew 100% that my parents weren't going to keep me sober. My boyfriend wasn't going to keep me sober. Like my dog wasn't going to keep me sober. The doctors were not going to keep me sober. And the treatment center itself was not going to keep me sober because I had been there time and time again. And I didn't stay sober. And so I knew that, I knew enough of the big book to know that they say the solution is relationship with God, the steps, like you need to get a sponsor. And that was in that moment in the hospital bed was like, oh, okay, well, I've literally tried everything else. I even tried like non-AA rehabs, like Smart Recovery or something, and it just didn't work for me. I tried every other option until I knew that there was literally nothing left but to open the book and do the work.
Awesome. Does anybody else have a question real quick? Yes, Brandy.
So now, what do you do on a daily basis? Can you kind of break down daily basis what you do for your recovery, weekly basis what you do on your recovery? Like, do you organize it? Do you compartmentalize it? Or do you find it's just kind of a way of life? So obviously we're in the Next Step program. Obviously I'm in early sobriety. And so this has become, I'm desperate, right? I'm so desperate that I am doing everything to the letter of the law, because I'm 55 years old. I just can't, I have to get it this time. And I have found that relief. And I've been in and out, doing this gig for many, many years. So now, what do you do? Does it become natural to you? Is this just, can you speak to, everybody says, recovery is the most important thing that you do. You have to put that number one, blah, 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 blah. Can you kind of speak to that? That would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to also tell you like what my life was like in early recovery, fresh out of treatment.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. So, because it looked a little bit differently then than it does now. So when I got out of treatment, I got commitments at meetings. I was there regularly all the time as a home group member. And I also had like H&I commitments where literally just any H&I that I could go to that was for helping women, I was there. My life was the program of AA. And I absolutely needed that, because when I look back at that first year of recovery, I think sometimes I'm like, it's a miracle I didn't pick up a drink, because I didn't even realize really how much I was struggling. And I think the reason I didn't realize it is because I was so immersed in helping other alcoholics that I didn't have time to get disconnected. Like I didn't have time to pick up a drink. And working with other alcoholics kept me focused on making sure I was maintaining that relationship with God. So that was just crucial to me. I had a child like unexpectedly in that first year out of treatment. And I was a single mom. And so that definitely changed dynamics a little bit. But what I was able to do was still keep the program at the center of it. Because I knew that like, if I suddenly prioritized, like I was just like, well, I'm not going to do anything but take care of my child. I was going to be disconnected from the program. I was going to be drunk, and I was not going to be any use to my son. So like, I still found a way to balance all that and make sure that I was staying focused on the 12-step work and my relationship with God. So I said, home group, service commitment, H&Is, working with other alcoholics, and then also really being diligent about making 10 and 11 a regular thing. So I had a sponsor that was militant about step 10. I mean, she wanted to hear from me multiple times a day, every day. And this is at like almost a year sober, maybe a little more. And so, I'm thinking like, oh, I've got a year, like I'm golden. And she was just like, sister, like you are still selfish, resentful, fearful, dishonest. And like, you just don't even know it. And so she really pushed me to like raise that awareness in myself. And that's what really allowed me, when I look back on that first year, to be like, holy cow, like I was not even aware of how much I was struggling, because I didn't have that awareness. And so that's why I say like really pushing to make 10, 11, and 12 like a regular part of your day, because now in year 10, it's much more second nature to be like, I need to 10-step that. Than it was in the beginning. In the beginning, I was just like, I have literally nothing to tell you. But now I could go back and look at one of those days in the first year and be like, oh my God, there's like 15, 10 steps I missed, and then I also with step 11, to making the nightly review and morning meditation, to just really being very disciplined about having that be a regular part of my day, to the point where it's like almost like brushing my teeth, like I'm doing it in the morning and I'm doing it at night, and it's just, there's just time for that. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
You did a great job. Thank you.
I have a question that I want to ask to piggyback off of that. Yeah. So you said that like you didn't have awareness on what to 10-step. You thought you had nothing to say. How would you, which I think is common, how did you build that awareness, and how would you what would you say to someone who's trying to build that awareness?
So I think, I was lucky to have a sponsor that was very present and communicative, in that like, if I hadn't called her that day, she would call me at the end of the day and be like, are you walking on water? Like, what are you doing? She was just, and that was her personality. She wasn't trying to be mean. She wasn't trying to shame me, but she just really wanted me to make it. And so I had a sponsor that was constantly reminding me to examine my day and my actions and my motives. And so when I was talking, if I hadn't called her, let's say, and she calls me, she's like, what's going on? How come I haven't heard from you? I would have that moment to like really sit back and look at my day and try to find, well, where was I selfish? Well, was I dishonest? And that helped raise the awareness. And then of course, like bringing it into prayer and meditation, for example, like asking God to give me that awareness of self, of where I am being selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid. And I think usually like resentments are kind of the easiest things to identify. We can sort of feel that, that anger when it comes up, but the selfishness, I think that was the biggest character defect that was cropping up. And it was the hardest one for me to see. And it would crop up in like subtle ways, or really embarrassing ways that I wouldn't want to talk about. Like, for example, my dad told me that my grandmother was sick and that she might die. And my first mental thought was, oh, I wonder if she's going to leave me any money. like horrible, like totally embarrassing. And I didn't want to tell my sponsor that, but I did. And she was like, oh, sister, like, God bless you. That is selfish. Like, you should pray about that, but she didn't shame me for it. And like, just being able to sort of like start to have that dialogue when that awareness was cropping up in whatever form really helped to just nurture it and have it grow.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? No? Okay. I have one. So we just recently did a workshop on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to hear what kind of fears come up for you today, and what do you do whenever you are in fear, and do you have the awareness around that?
Okay. Certainly.
And maybe you can even share too about whenever you first got sober too, if you want to do that.
Sure. Yeah. I think I'm like hyper aware of fear. I am a fearful creature by nature. So yes, I still have fears. I think the primary fears center around my child, and if I'm being a good mom, or how I've shaped him and what he'll be like when he grows up. I think in the beginning, the biggest fear I had was that I wouldn't stay sober. I have a really vivid memory of being in my kitchen and doing the dishes, and everything was going great. And I just had this thought. I was like, these things are going way too well. Like, you're definitely going to relapse soon, because people like you don't stay sober. So like, it's just like, there's just no way that this is going to be sustainable. And I just had this impending doom fear that like a drink was around the corner, even though I was doing everything that my sponsor asked me to do, and working with other alcoholics and growing in my relationship with God. And I remember, calling my sponsor and 10-stepping that fear. And she was just reminding me of everything that I'm doing, that the program asks us to do. And that if I am doing those things, then like I am safe and protected. I love fear inventory. I think I see fear inventory done in such a variety of ways that if you find one that works for you, great. I mean, and I also hear like everyone say like, oh, the way I do it is out of the book, which is interesting because I see like 4 different ways that are out of the book. But the way that I like to do it, that my sponsor has me doing it, primarily focuses on the question that's asked of us in the book, which is that what would God have me do and what would God have me be? And those 2 questions, I bring in those 2 questions into almost every area of my day. So when I am having fear and I do a fear inventory, right? Like, what is the fear? Why do I have it? Where is my reliance? It's never on God when that fear is cropping up, never. So those 2 questions, what would God have me do and what would God have me be? That's where I can really start to see some truth around the fear and start to find some relief, because I can intuitively know that like God would not have me acting out in the fear in whatever way that is. And God would definitely have me helping other people and being a woman that's reliant upon him. And so I can, like, when I ask myself those questions in almost any scenario, I'm able to see the answer to that. And it just gives me a lot of clarity in terms of like, what is the next step to outgrowing this fear? Does that answer your question, Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question? Okay. Oh, Regina does. Yay.
Oh, hey, Stephanie, I have one of my housemates listening. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
She has a question.
Okay.
Lisa, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I've been clean since March 10th. My question is, and this is something I'm struggling with now, is finding the time. I work doubles, at work, and I'm trying to figure out how to fit everything in the days, hours of the day. So I know like last week I was struggling and I was going to call my sponsor, but I got up late, running out the door to get to work. And then I'm at work all day. I don't get off until, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I get home and I'm so tired. I'm like, I'll call her in the morning and then I sleep in, So how did you make the time, you know, to actually put your sobriety like before work, before, you know, how do you do that?
I mean, for me, a lot of that came from a gigantic fear that I would go back to drinking, and also the knowledge that I did not have a choice in whether I picked up another drink. I did not. The only choice I had was to do, like, for example, to pick up the phone and call my sponsor like she asked me to do. Like, I had that choice, right? But I didn't have a choice if I was going to pick up another drink. So having that awareness and knowing that that was my truth, that lack of choice in whether I picked up another drink, that's what drove me to be desperate to do whatever I had to do to stay sober. And I mean, I work 12-hour shifts, so I understand, like, that long, like, you're up early, you get home late. I totally get that. But, like, there's just something that is still to this day drives me from, like, the pit of my stomach to be like, I absolutely, under no circumstances, want to go back to living the way that I was living before. And so if I'm going to be tired and, like, still get up early to call my sponsor, then I'm going to be tired and still get up early to call my sponsor. Like, it has to come from that level of desperation. Like, I will do anything to not go back to living the way that I was before. And just, like, I would have that reminder when I would wake up and the alarm would go off, and I would just be like, oh, I don't want to do this, right? And then I would have this flash of, like, maybe one of, like, the worst days, or that feeling of, like, waking up with a hangover and you have to go to work, and I'd be like, nope, I'm good, I'm awake. And yeah, so, like, having that discipline and that drive inside to, like, do whatever it takes to not go back to the way that things were. All right. And then, like, praying and asking God to help you with those things, that really genuinely helps, like, because there have been so many, like, countless occasions where I have asked God to help me with something, and out of nowhere, like, I have this willingness to do it, this awareness to do it. I mean, I quit smoking a couple years ago, and, like, people were like, what did you do? And literally, like, I prayed for God to remove the desire to stop smoking. And like, I couldn't even believe that those were coming out of, like, that's it. That was literally it. And, like, and I was able to quit smoking. But I mean, asking God to help you with that will absolutely work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, Brandy.
I'm 55 years old, and I have a 26-year-old daughter. And, you know, I've been drunk half her life. But in the midst of the fire, because I'm in the midst of the fire, and believe me, she's a great young lady, and I need desperately for God to restore that relationship. But right now we're in the middle of that. So and I don't know if you can speak to that because you don't have experience with that because your child has never seen you drunk. But do you have any words of wisdom to get through? Can you speak? I can't even. I'm not gonna. I just. It's so painful. I can't even, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly cannot imagine, like, the pain that you're feeling right now, and I don't have experience personally with the exact position that you are in, but the experience that I do have is that I'm a child of an alcoholic, and although I was quite young when my mom got sober, I don't really remember her drinking. I remember her changing, and suddenly this quick to anger mother that I had to walk on eggshells around is kind, and she's loving, and she's present, and she's asking me how I am. And so what I remember as a child is that change, and noticing that change, even though I had no idea what was really going on. And so I think I share that with you, and that, like, I am sure that your daughter is able to sense a change. And I don't know where you are in your relationship with her, if there's contact or no contact or limited contact.
Contact.
There is contact. Okay. So, you know, I sponsor someone who lost her child because of her addiction. And it's taken years of work to get back to the relationship that she wants. And I remember telling her throughout those years that, like, I don't know God's will, but I'm pretty positive that God's will is for her to have a relationship with her child and for her to amend what's been broken. And then as long as she stays close to God and like does what she's supposed to do, that will work out, that things will work out. And that's what's happened for her. And so I would say the same things to you, that like, there obviously harms are there, damage has been done. But if you continue to do this work, right, to follow God's will for your life in recovery, that like he will be able to like pave the way for a repaired relationship, for an amended relationship. That is probably something that you can't even imagine right now because it is so new. But I know that there are lots of women out there who are in a similar situation and have had a similar situation, and like they have recovered and they have repaired that relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marlena. Anybody else? Okay, I have a few questions, so I try to figure out which ones I want to ask first.
Okay.
So, okay, to go back on your son, right? I remember last time you were here, you spoke onto the selfishness that was in that relationship. And so an area in the big book where it promises that we will drink again is if our sex conduct continues to harm others. So will you speak to using like your experience, like the that part of the book? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I think I do. So
Okay.
let me just give like a little bit of backstory for everyone else. I was in recovery. I had worked the steps. I was sponsoring other women, so I was like recovered, right, by any means. But so I just assumed that recovered would just immediately flow into all other areas of my life without much work. So when it comes to the topic of sex, that was no different. And I was dating someone who was in treatment in the sober living. And I was totally delusional in the thoughts like, I won't get pregnant. I can't get pregnant. I wasn't on birth control. And I got pregnant, and I just thought in my mind, well, like, I don't care if he's involved or not. It's not going to matter. As long as I'm okay with being a single mom, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks, right? And he immediately relapsed. And I realized suddenly that I had no real ability to earn a living to pay for a child. Daycare is so expensive. And my family is like, we just got our, death stage alcoholic daughter recovered, and now she's going to be a mom. And then, of course, my son's father's family also being like, who is this woman you met in rehab that's going to have our grandchild? Like, I mean, just, affecting everything. I would have had no way of knowing like how much selfishness was centered in that decision until I got through to the other side of it. And when I realized like how selfish everything was, I had to take a step back. And I subsequently, like, I was actually so afraid of continuing to cause harm to others that I didn't date or anything for 2 years after my son was born. I was focused on the program. I was focused on my son, and I was focused on that was pretty much it. I didn't have time for much else. So again, like I've told you guys, when I look back on that first year out of treatment, which is really more like I had already been sober a year when I left treatment, that I was really so much sicker than I ever could have known. And like that, a lot of that is centered around the sex conduct, that I wasn't honest with the birth control or my ability to get pregnant. I wasn't honest with myself about like what my motives were. And I was selfish in thinking that like I could just have a baby and everything would just magically work out. But what I found is that even if I'm okay with being a single parent, my son is not. And I have family that like loves and cares for him, and I have to figure out a way to like make that all work no matter how I feel about it. And his father has never actually gotten sober or sustained sobriety. And so now there's this missing relationship in his life that I am not able to magically fix. And so just this snowball effect of some simple careless decisions that I made, and still at 8 years cleaning up the wreckage of that choice, my sex conduct was very messy. You know, I just want to say, like, absolutely love my son more than anything else in this world, and I'm so glad that I have him. But the actions and the decisions around that conduct was extremely harmful, and I'm very, very grateful to be sober through it all, because it could have easily ended up very different. Did I answer your question, Stephanie? Because sometimes I feel like my mind goes like, woo.
Yeah. Yeah. If nobody else has a question, I'm going to piggyback off that question. Okay. So, you talked about like the harms, and, you know, in the book, it asks like, who did we hurt? Was it selfish or not? And you answered those questions, but then it goes off and tells us, about a sane and sound. So do you mind, sharing your, I guess, a little bit about your specific sane and sound?
Sure. Yeah. I will say, like, I didn't get a whole lot of direction on sane and sound when I first did it. And I honestly thought that it was like characteristics of the man. So I was like, has a lot of tattoos, has dark hair. Like, I didn't understand what it was. And I'm sure you guys at Maggie's have a lot better education on that than I did originally. But my sex conduct, or my sane and sound sex ideal, also used to be a lot longer. And what I found is that it's really hard for me to recall it. And so when I am meeting, you know, I'm married now, but before when I was dating, it's like, oh, what was on my sane and sound? Does this match up? I'm not sure. So I found that it's a lot helpful to like hone it down to like 3 or 4 sentences, or just a couple like core qualities that I can remember. And, you know, typically that's going to be like honest. For me, I wanted to have someone who had a relationship with God, and somebody who was willing to grow in our relationship through like the good and the bad times. And so those were like really the 3 primary things. And the rest that I was just praying for, like, you know, God, like whoever that is and whatever that looks like, please just help me be open to it. But you know, that those kind of things are different for everyone. But I do remember like dating someone, and he was an atheist. And I remember trying to share something with him. Like I had Hep C, and there was this treatment for Hep C that was so expensive. And out of nowhere, like the insurance company was just like, you're approved and it's only going to cost you $10. And it was like a $90,000 treatment. And I was just like, holy cow, like this is like amazing. Like I prayed for this. And this guy was just like, you're dumb. Like that's dumb. And I was like, okay, this is not in accordance with my sane and sound ideal. And I really liked this person, and I cared for him so much, but I knew that like that did not align with what God would have me do and be in a relationship. And I walked away from the relationship, and I still think that was the right decision. And it's hard. Like I'll sponsor other women, and I'll be like, does that match up with your sane and sound ideal? And if the answer is no, I really encourage them to take a look at that, because there is a meaning and there is use in that sane and sound ideal. It is not just a couple words we write on a page for our 5th step and then leave behind in the dust. Like take that with you and carry it into your relationships. I really recommend that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else have a question? Okay. So one of the things that like I let the girls know ahead of time is that you have a very full life. You have lots of affairs. not marital affairs, but like affairs in life. So I thought you would be a great person. Yes, Wesley agrees. That you would be a great person to speak on practicing principles in all your affairs and what that looks like.
Sure. So I'm a nurse at a hospital, and I'm a mom, and I'm a wife, and I'm a member of AA. So there's a lot of things going on there. And so I think when Stephanie says like practicing the principles in all your affairs, I mean, obviously like that would apply in AA and in my interactions with people in the program, right? Like one thing that I heard early on was like the phrase talking clean but living dirty, right? And so that would be like people who are preaching the steps and preaching the book, but then when no one's looking, like they're sleeping around with a bunch of people and lying about it, or they're not really working 10, 11, and 12. They're just talking about it in meetings, right? And who at the end of the day knows if we're working 10, 11, and 12? Hopefully our sponsor, but ultimately like you and God, right? So like a lot of that has to come back to you, and that, you know, like I knew in my heart, like other people, maybe they don't see me as much at meetings anymore, but I know that I'm doing 10, 11, and 12, that I'm growing in my relationship with God, and that I'm helping other alcoholics, and I'm being of service to my family in the way that they need me. So even if from the outside, maybe I don't look like the most actively involved AA, I know that on the inside, my relationship with God is good. And I can stand in that truth. And so I think I skipped ahead a little bit. And what I was trying to say is it is a lot harder now to be actively involved in attending meetings and going to H&Is because my schedule is very busy. And so earlier on in sobriety, I was there all the time. I was at meetings, I was doing H&Is, I had service commitments. I was always out doing something with the fellowship. Now I'm at the point where I'm less out there doing things, and it's more like doing stuff at home, and making sure that I'm continuing to work the program and work with other women. Sponsorship is one of the biggest things that I can do that in. So to get back to the original question, which was working the principles in all my affairs, that applies in my marriage. And I am married to somebody who is in the program of AA. And we had different, like, I went to long-term treatment, he went to AA to get sober. So we've had different experiences and sort of like a different knowledge of where we're coming from, and just learning to practice like love and tolerance of others. And to, even if like he's not showing me the ideals that I want, to still show him the ideals that I want. Because how can I transmit something I haven't got, right? How am I asking him to behave a certain way if I'm not doing that to him? And sometimes it is very, very humbling to do that. But I know that that's what God would have me do. I am not by any means perfect at it. I absolutely have my grumpy days where I need to make amends for things that I've done. But again, amends is part of the program, and that is practicing the principles in all my affairs. The biggest area of my life where I have to practice the program in a more discreet manner is at work. I'm a nurse, and I, after talking to my sponsor and some other women in the program, decided to not be initially open about my recovery. There's a lot of stigma attached to people in recovery working in the medical field. So practicing the principles in all my affairs at work when I was very quietly sober. I mean, I told people I didn't drink, but I left it at that. Was a little more tricky because I couldn't really like walk up to coworker and be like, yesterday when you asked me to help you with a patient and I said no, like I was wrong and this is step 9 and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like I had to figure out how to do that while still maintaining my anonymity. And that's actually been more manageable than I had expected. I am open now about being in recovery. But I would say this to any, so I don't drag on too much. I would say to any woman, like, if you are laying your head on your pillow at night and you have that, like, that gut God consciousness saying like, that's not, you didn't do what you needed to do today. Like, get up and write that nightly review, get up and say that prayer, like do those things that you know in your heart that you're supposed to be doing, even when no one is watching. And I know that those types of little things, those little steps behind closed doors, are what has kept me sober, because there have been times where I could not get to a meeting and I could not get to an H&I. But doing what was taught to me, the very basics of the program, are the things that keep me moving forward in the program and keep me connected at a time where I would very likely become disconnected.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my next question is, with you, like going back on that fact that you have a full life, did you ever think that you would have the life that you have today back whenever you were getting sober?
No, I mean, I know that, like, I'm an alcoholic and I had outside issues, but when I walked into, like when I got sober, I had never finished college. So I just had a high school education, which nothing wrong with that, but like, it was just hard for me to make the living that I wanted to make with it. I had been very, very low in my alcoholism, where I had done a lot of things that I wasn't proud of, and I had become a person that I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want my children to be. So I had come from a pretty dark and difficult place, and I didn't think I had much to offer the world, honestly. And so I thought that, when I did get sober, the only thing that I would have to offer ever at all would be my experience of getting sober, which is invaluable. I mean, you cannot put a price on that. So if that was the only thing I had to offer this world, then like, that's good enough. And that is fantastic. But in trying to make a living to support my son, God has a twisted sense of humor, and I was offered a job at a pain management clinic. And my sponsor was like, well, go to the interview and just see how it goes. And I got a job there, and working there showed me that, like, when it talks about how God can remove that desire to drink, like completely remove it, that was shown to me through working at that place, because I was handling medications that, several years prior would have ended up in my pocket for sure. And I had absolutely no desire. There was no obsession. There was no desire. I was relieved from that. And so that's what led me into nursing. And nursing now, I work in a cardiovascular ICU, and I care for patients who are sometimes like the sickest of the sick. And to mentally be able to navigate that type of care blows my mind that I didn't kill too many brain cells to do that sort of thing. It honestly is all God, not Marlena at all, college dropout, like bottom of the barrel alcoholic. And I'm able now to provide care sometimes for alcoholics who are in the ICU because of their alcoholism. And to see that complete change of position is mind-blowing. And then not just career, but like having a family and having a husband. I live in a house, and we can walk my son to the public school. And I mean, just every aspect I could have never imagined. Family relationships, like my sister didn't talk to me until I was 2 years sober. She was so mad at me, are repaired. And yeah, it's literally beyond my wildest dreams. I feel like a lot of people say that. I absolutely mean it. And I totally believe that other people mean it too, because it really is. This program is amazing.
Thank you. All right. Now, before I ask the wrap up question, does anybody have a question? Okay. So my wrap up question would be, if you would leave us on one takeaway, like if you're saying, like, if you don't hear anything at all, hear this, what would that takeaway be? What would you want us to take away?
Honestly, like, I think that if you don't hear anything else, and if you ever don't know what to do, the answer for me, and I hope the answer for you, is to always come back to God and to a relationship with God. That above everything else has been my guiding force, has been my safety, has been my shelter, has guided me through some of the most difficult times in recovery. And all of these things that are external, they can all be taken away. The house, the husband, the kid, the job, right? My AA meetings, suddenly there's a pandemic and I can't go to them. Like, all of that stuff is external. And the one thing that I can never, ever lose is that relationship with God. Nobody can take that away from me. And so if there's nothing else that you hear, I would say to nurture, protect, and grow that relationship with God, because at the end of the day, if you have nothing else, you'll always have that, and that will always keep you safe.
Thank you so much. That was so good. And I will see all of y'all later. Okay?
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Marlena.
Thank you, Marlena.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services that we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channel by searching for the Magdalen House.